Hello and welcome to another episode of
Lume Plotters, and we're about to drop some knowledge on you today with watch terminology.
Ooh.
So, as our friend Nico says, take a coffee because this is going to be a long one. Yes, so we're going to go through and talk about a whole bunch of watch-related topics.
Mm-hmm.
These are the first iteration of these watch terminologies. These are ones that we hope that you already know, or if you don't, then you can learn some things. But then in a later episode, we will have a follow-up with watch terminology that you won't or may not know.
Exactly.
Yes. So before we get started, Ralph.
Oh, yeah.
What is on your wrist?
Oh, on my wrist. Because yesterday I was at dinner in the Royal Atlantis in this wonderful Lamar.
So you're wearing a vacheron.
Peruvian restaurant. I was wearing my vacheron because I was wearing something blue, so I had the blue strap on it. But I saw my friend and he was wearing his new Glashütte Original Pano Retrograph. That's absolutely insane. Yes. And of course, I played around with it. I did it. I made it chime and all of this stuff. I did this countdown and the retro and going backwards and forwards. It is absolutely insane. It's a slightly bigger case than mine that I have today.
So you have the Geo.
My Geo Pano Reserve. What is it called? Panomatic Reserve, is it? Panomatic Reserve, yeah.
In yellow gold.
Rose gold.
Rose gold. Okay. And what did I get you for this watch?
Well, I haven't got it yet, but
I will give it to you.
I have seen a picture.
Yes, it is a bright orange.
Yeah, a helicopter landing strap. So I can actually land helicopters with it.
It is a goatskin, a textured goatskin strap from Hodinkee, and it is bright orange, like safety orange.
Yes.
And I think it's going to be super cool with that. I literally bought a big lot. Yeah, exactly. I bought a lot of straps, literally a lot of straps, not like a lot of straps.
LOT.
From eBay. And I think 10 straps all in all, 19 millimeters. And in this lot came this orange strap. And I was thinking to myself, there's no way in hell I'm pulling this off. So I said, I know exactly who could pull this off.
Absolutely. I am wearing orange. I like orange.
Yeah, I think it'd be cool. Yeah. So there you go. And it's a very, absolutely buttery, smooth goat skin.
Yeah, it's a nice strap. Thank you.
There you go. That's because you remember I took a strap back from you a long time ago. I sold you a strap and then I needed it back. So this is a repayment for the strap loan. And I think you'll like this one better. All right.
Good. So
I am wearing not a strap watch.
Ooh.
This is one of your favorites.
Yeah, it's a very nice one.
The Cartier Santos on the beautiful bracelet. I love this bracelet.
Yeah, it is very nice. I think it's if it comes to bracelets, I think Cartier is killing it. There's no wonder that they are replaced Omega at number 2 because they have better bracelets.
There's and look at how thin it is. We were talking on the last episode about thickness of watches, and this one's the 8 millimeters or 9 millimeters, 8 point something, I think, and with a full winding rotor. Yeah,
and it is nicely curved, which is also really, really happy.
I don't know if the movement is actually curved. Let me see. No, the movement is flat. So the watch above the movement, so that the top, the dial, not the dial, the bezel and the sapphire is curved, but the bottom is flat. But I have seen the Tanko, I think is a Cintre, that is
right.
Everything is curved, and I don't know how the movement looks in that because I have not Googled it or looked it up. But I could see that being a design problem.
I must say I love this watch, but there's one for auction at the moment, right? But it's the Santos 100 XL. And my God, is this thing chunky. I tried it on.
It is super chunky.
Tried it on when it wasn't any auction, when it was a normal sale. And I thought, geez, I like big watches. But man, this is just too big. This is even too big for me. I was like, whoa, and it's heavy and it's just gigantic. It's like the absolute Breitling 48 millimeter comparison from Cartier.
Yeah.
No wonder they don't do it anymore. So it's just too big, too gaudy. Yeah. So.
I could never. So
anyhow, lovely watch. Lovely
all right.
watch.
So let's get into the topic.
Okay, let me take a look.
I've already mentioned
list.
15 of the words that we're going to use today. And define,
oh my God, we're explaining all of these different things.
We're going to go essentially through a watch. We're going to walk you through the things on the watch and what they're called, essentially, right? So we're going to start with kind of the most obvious one, which is the case.
Yeah. So the case, So the case usually comes in different shapes. Obviously, which I think we have not put on our list, right? The different case shapes. I just realized we have a list,
but we're going to add to it as we go.
We should start
shapes.
So shapes. We have the classical round shape. Then you say one. All right, now you.
Rectangular. We have the tank shape.
Then we have the octagonal shape,
which was the APs, right? The Royal Oaks. And the G-Shock stole it and everyone else. We have a tonneau shape, which is half squarish, half rectangular, and half round.
Yeah.
It's a little bit in between.
Then we have the oval shape.
Oh, the ellipse.
Yeah, like that, exactly like the ellipse, or like the what was the AP the sideways oval one that they had until recently. I forgot the name.
I do not know.
Audemars Piguet, millenary. Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
We have squares.
Correct. Not just rectangular, but squares. Yeah. And then we have. And now I'm just starting to get a bit
cushion.
Yeah, cushion. That's a bit like a blown up square.
Oval. Yeah, basically. It's an ovular square, I guess. Something
so
like
where
this.
Actually the angles of the case have more than 360 degrees because they're pushed outside. Because they're round, right? So sort of weird. So I think that's basically the most of these. And then of course when you have the case, general case shape, you have also, let's not speak about the connection to the bracelet or the strap yet. Let's talk about the top and the bottom of the case itself. So usually in order to see the time, you have something to see the dial through on the watch.
No,
right?
We're not there yet. We're not even close to being there yet.
Okay, top case?
No, we're still on materials. What about materials?
So,
what kind
let's say
of
materials.
Materials do we have for the case, right? If we're going to stick to cases, we're going to stick to cases. So materials, you could have steel, the most common, right?
Yeah.
We could have gold. We can have yellow gold, rose gold, white gold, platinum.
All the precious
ceramic.
metals of the world, right? Yeah.
Silver.
Tungsten. Very heavy.
Yeah. What else do we have?
Stone.
Some people make wood as well.
Yeah, Tissot has some very, very famous stone dials and
not dials. We're talking about cases.
Stone cases, stone watches. Remember these stone watches that that Tissot made? I was around at the time in the 80s, 90s when they made these stone dial, stone cases, and wood cases. And then we have as well. What else do we have? We have ceramic. Obviously, I have one of these.
I mentioned that.
Then sapphire. Richard Mille and Hublot
Sapphire,
are doing
I forgot about that.
sapphire cases.
Richard Mille and Hublot have those.
So that's interesting. And some other smaller brands like, I don't know if it was Rebellion or some other ones that had these.
Titanium. We forgot titanium.
Yeah. Well, it's one of them. Yeah. Metals. Yeah.
Metals. All right. Okay. Copper. Brass. Bronze. Sorry, not copper, brass.
Bronze. Definitely.
Bronze.
Yeah.
We have a lot of bronze cases these days, right?
Yeah. The older pocket watches made of tin, but they would scratch a lot.
Also, you could have them plated. It doesn't have to be actually gold, right? We could have plated, or we could have what Tudor is calling, what do they call it? Capping,
call
where you have more gold.
Yeah, they have
gold
about...
plate is essentially dipped, right?
No, gold plated is really microns, just a couple of microns. Absolutely.
No, but I'm saying they dip it in gold, in melted gold, right?
No.
They're not dipping. It's capping the dipping.
That is vaporizing stuff. So basically, you have just gold dust flying, and you put a current on the steel, and then it's different polarity, and then the gold actually attaches to the place. But it's so little gold. I mean, just to give you an idea, if you put leaf gold on a statue, let's say a life-size statue of a horse and a rider, and you want to plate this with gold leaf, you just take a normal, let's say a 1 dirham coin of gold, and you can cover the entire statue with leaf gold because that is so thin. It is a very little amount of gold. But electroplating, gold plating, I mean, it's even less than that because it's even not by a whole amount thinner. So it's really a very, very small amount of gold. That's why you have to be careful when you actually polish these watches. They can do 1-2 polishes when you have only gold-plated watches, but then you actually get into seeing the steel through it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
okay.
That's the benefit of capping, because capping is a couple of millimeters. That's a whole different ballpark of having a 2-3 millimeters of actual gold on top of the steel.
All right. Okay.
Wrapped around it, basically. Yeah.
Now, before we go any further, let's talk about
well, then
integrated part of the case.
While we are at the case and the materials, we should also talk about the surface finishes.
Ooh, yes, yes. Okay, so
generally there are 3. You can polish things, and then you can have specific.
Polish is shiny, right?
Shiny. And then you have different versions.
Mirror polish, black mirror polish it, which is what Grand Seiko does, right? Zaratsu polish.
And what does it mean? And that means that you have absolutely distortion-free polishing. So that means when you look at yourself, basically in this watch, you will see yourself without any distortion, which is very hard to do. So that's why it's so special. And why it's called mirror polishing or black polishing is when you have depending on what you look at, it can look black. But depending on the angle, otherwise it's fully reflective, right? So anyhow, so that's that. They use this a lot as well for other pieces, like on the back for screws and other things that are black polished sometimes, because it looks cool and is expensive to do and usually handmade. So and then you can have different surface treatments, right? With brushing, vertical, horizontal, circular. Then you can have blasted cases, bead blasting, sand blasting with farts. I don't know what else you can do, but there's lots of things. Unicorn farts, obviously.
Yes, obviously. But the blasting, of course, will make it look a uniform color, right? It looks almost like sandpaper.
And it gives you the satinating as well. So you have sometimes, that's what Rolex does a lot, right? Satinated areas where you have just a very...
we could PVC coat.
PVC coat.
PVC, PVD.
PVD, yes.
PVC is plastic.
Pulverized vapor disposition.
PVD, yes. So we could put in different colors, right? So right now, Baltic just came out with a whole line of gold-colored PVD-coated watches, right? So it's still stainless steel down at the core, but they changed the color and the surface, and it should theoretically be a little bit more able to withstand scratches than just paint.
And then you have DLC coating as well, which is diamond-like carbon deposits.
G-Shock does this, and they're supposed to be unscratchable, right? They're supposed to be like ceramic, because they're mimicking ceramic, essentially.
And then there's some surface treatments that you can do with steel or any other metal, like the Seiko does Dia Shield. Then is Dia Tech. I think Citizen has some of these things. Then Bremont, for example, does a very cool surface treatment where they actually increase the Vickers from, like, say, for 600, 800 to 4,000. So scratch resistance is much, much higher. So there's a lot of these different things that you can do. So there's a whole science.
So Vickers, for those of you that don't know, is not the
scale.
person, not the priest in the church. A
Not a
vicar is
vicar,
the
no.
measure of hardness, right? It's a measure of hardness scale.
It's one of the
But
different
actually,
ones. Yeah, there's
it is
rose
also a priest
for
in the
diamonds
church, right?
and some other things. But there's so many different ways of making these cases. And just recently, I listened to a podcast of our friends from A Block to Watch talking about gold and why gold watches are so much more expensive, even though the material is not that much more expensive, technically. And it's apparently the process of making gold cases is much more intensive. It's like when you have usually for steel case, you get a blank as a manufacturer that has a specific size, and then you start stamping it 2-3 times, and then blop, it's in the right shape. With gold, it's different because you don't have the luxury of wasting material because it's more expensive. So you have to make it very tailor-made for that specific watch. And that creates more setup for the suppliers that have to do this. And basically you're paying for the time of them setting up the machines and all of the stuff to give you these blanks that are really just for that little bit of stamping that you then need in the end. So it's like 5 or 6 more steps that are needed, and that's why it's so expensive, and especially because you usually have smaller amounts as well that you do in precious metal. So it's everything is just getting more expensive because no economies of scale, and less material to waste in brackets, quotation marks. So yeah.
All right. That's enough about that.
That's enough
Let's
about
go on
that.
to the next thing. We're still on cases. We haven't moved on.
You could
Let's
also
talk about what's attached to cases, which is lugs.
You can also put some diamonds onto the cases, right?
Oh,
the ladies
yeah.
like that.
So we could have pave. You could essentially have a diamond set bezel. Oh, we haven't gotten to bezels. Sorry. Take that back. We could put on the case itself diamonds.
Or on the
we'll leave it
bracelets.
at that.
Rolex does.
We're not talking about bracelets.
No. What I'm saying
only
is you
talking
can
about cases.
put the cases. You can put diamonds on the lugs and other areas.
We
of the
haven't
case.
mentioned lugs. We don't know what lugs are. I just only know what a case is so far.
Okay, so
Next, we'll go into lugs.
Okay.
Which, yes, you can also set. But lugs are the extension of the case where you would, of course, put in your bracelet. And there's different types of this. Most traditionally, going back to when pocket watches started to become wristwatches, being put on the wrist, the simplest way we would do this was we would take wires and we would attach essentially thin wire to a pocket watch, weld it on, and you would have, ta-da, wire lugs, which today still a lot of manufacturers use. Nomos loves to use this. Panerai loves to use this on their Luminors. Radiomirs, not Luminors. So that's one thing. Then we go into there's 2 more kind of things. So that was the first one, right? Then they started welding lugs onto pocket watches, right? And essentially those were a little bit thicker than the wires that they did previously. And these were substantial metal pieces that they would put, and they would weld onto the lug itself or onto the case itself. And that's where you would put the strap. Also important to mention with the wire lugs, traditionally you had to sew on the straps. There was no releasing them. Whatever strap you had would be sewn onto the watch, and that was the watch strap. And if you wanted a new one, you'd have to cut it off, and then you would sew on a new one.
Yeah.
All right. Regular lugs are the ones that are...
They're usually welded, I think, to the case. They're not necessarily...
No, they're one piece.
That depends. I mean, Patek, for example, always welds their lugs.
Really? Because doesn't Rolex have
Always.
one piece case in lug?
Might be, but for example, if you go for Patek or something, they weld they have their case, and then they put the lugs in, they weld them, and then they polish them, and then it looks like one piece. It always ends up looking like it's one piece. That's the normal idea, but usually they are sometimes put into there's connectors, and then you put them in, and then you weld them. So, and then you polish everything fine. It's just it's a whole science. And it's for a long time, even the companies like Patek and AP and Vacheron didn't do their own cases. They actually outsourced that because they couldn't do what these case makers could do. There was specialized case makers that had all of these fancy machines and the knowledge and all of this stuff to do all of these incredible cases. And now that watchmakers trying to differentiate themselves a bit more from others, they take a lot of this know-how in-house and saying, okay, we keep that for ourselves. We don't want others to have the same kind of technology, so we're doing it all by ourselves. So yeah, there's lots of these things. So by the way, one of the words that other people use for these, especially in Germanic languages, is for lugs. They use it as horns,
which is another type of lug, right? If we look at the corn de vache, the corn de vache is exactly named after this. They are horns.
Horns of a cow.
Yep. So that's called the horn or corn de vache. Okay. Some people will drill through their lugs so that you can easily remove your spring bars, which we'll get to in another section, spring bars. But anyway, the idea is to make strap changes easier.
Or general bars, because like Panerais, they don't necessarily have a spring-loaded bars, but that's a different story. But they have the holes for screws that you can actually put this bar that holds the strap or the bracelet through these through the case, so that it's attached to it without losing it. Because that's the one thing you don't want. Lose your watch.
One more that I'm going to mention here before we move on is something that we hear about a lot in the Speedmaster world, liar lugs.
Yeah, they're all liars. Liars. The moon landing is
fake. Everyone's a liar.
No, it's liar.
So essentially, liar lugs are going to be, how do I say it? They're twisted. So apparently a lyre is a type of string instrument, right? And it has these weird twisted looking, I guess, wooden pieces. And then whenever the Omega Speedmasters started making they used to have straight lugs, right? And then they started making these twisted pattern on the lugs. And these were then known as lyre lugs because they're kind of twisted. Okay.
Lyre with a Y, L-Y-R-E, right?
Yes, correct. So, all right. Now, that puts us away from
so many
the case.
Yeah.
I accidentally clicked something on our list and now everything kind of got messed up. But let's talk quickly about the mid case, because this is something that we often call the side of the case, right? Which is still technically a part of the case. There are situations where it is separate, when we have a top and a bottom, and then you have a middle. But in a lot of these modern watches, you're looking at a single-pieced case, right? A single-piece case.
So, one example, I think, for traditional three-piece case is obviously the traditional watchmakers, like AP and especially Patek Philippe. They are still doing the traditional way of having multiple pieces and putting a case together. Or, for example...
The easiest one to see this in is the Bremont.
Yeah, Bremont, exactly. That's what I was just about to say. My Bremont, and that's called the triptych case for three, right? Because it has three pieces. There's the barrel, which is the mid case. There's the top case that attaches to it. And the bottom. So, you have three pieces.
Very cool.
And depending on when you have, for example, the mid case of the Black Bay, the normal Black Bay, not the 58, but let's just say the normal standard Black Bays, the GMTs and all of these, 41, the bigger ones, they have a slab-sided mid case, which makes the watch feel very big. If you look at like a Speedmaster, for example, they have a very small mid case. They have a bulbous bottom case. They have a bulbous on the top. So basically, even if they have the same thickness than a Black Bay, they appear so much smaller on the wrist because
they're so slab-sided
design. Yes, because it's not such a big wall of metal looking at you. So
we've mentioned top case. We've mentioned mid case. That means there's one more piece of the case that we have to mention, which is going to be the bottom or the case back, right?
Correct.
So the bottom of this case also can have a whole bunch of different things.
Yes.
It can be screwed in, which is a very, very complicated term, because technically I can look at my, the one I'm wearing today, my Cartier, which is screwed in. I'm confusing myself. So there's two types of screws, right? You could have a screw down. Is it screw down case back, which is essentially the entire case back screws into the case.
Correct.
Or you could have a screwed case back, in which case you have multiple little screws holding on the case back. They are the absolute opposite, but the name is almost the same.
Yes, it's one is actually held by screws, and of course there are some big examples, like for example the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak, where you have the screw bottom on the top of the watch, and on the back you actually have the real screw, right? Actually, it's a bit. A lot of people think that's actually the screw on top. No, it's not, because it's actually in a holder. But it's you have that. So the case back basically is pushed or screwed in with a couple of different screws around the bottom of the case, and then of course you have other ones. And then Omega does a great job. In general, the Swatch Group does a great job of these Naya lock cases and all of the stuff where this is this, even if it's a screw back case, it's always aligned, right?
Yep.
Because that's the downside of screws, and you have the seals inside and the gaskets. Over time, there's tolerances. Also the screwing is not 100% the same. So that means that sometimes the bottom of the case is not 100% straight. It's not aligned, right? So the text or whatever it is there that you see, it's not 100% aligned straight. And that can be, for watch collectors, horrible, right?
Yes,
the
terrible.
OCD. It's like, oh no.
So then we have two main types of case backs. Either it's going to be a solid case back made of metal, or it's going to be a transparent case back where you can see the movement.
Or it's both.
Right? Or it's both. And in both, we call it the hunter case back.
Yes.
So transparent, glass generally, plexi in some cases where you could see the case movement. And then hunter, you get to open it. It's a solid case back that you open with a hinge and then see your case back.
You're saying glass. I mean, it's not anymore normal. Window glass.
It's not window glass. It's sapphire
or mineral crystal, but usually something that's hardened. Some watches still use hardened glass. That is actually but it's hardened, so that means it's not normal glass that breaks easily.
We'll talk about this in a moment as well.
Yeah, this is for the front of it, but this is basically for the back.
But one thing that we have to agree is one thing that we often complain about and look at is the size of a movement through the case back, right? So if we have a clear case back, we generally want the movement to fit to the size of the case.
Who's we?
And if it doesn't, if it's too small, people complain.
Who's we?
We in general. The royal we.
The watch
the royal
nerds.
we.
The watch nerds.
Yes.
Us.
Yes. So, all right.
Us.
That's irrelevant. We're not going into that, but nonetheless. Okay. Then on the side of the case, we generally have something or multiple things, right? We can have something that you may have heard of called a crown. And there's multiple types of crowns. So, Ralph, would you like to tell us?
Yeah, I'm going a step back, right? Because that's what you have. Basically, the first watches didn't have crowns. Crowns was a very recent as in 100 years ago, development.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about keys.
Because they had keys. And that's why inside the watch movement, there's still a whole area that's called the keyless works. And you think, why keyless works? Where would I have a key, right? What do I need a key for in a watch?
Yes.
But actually, there were keys to wind the watch. You used like a small Allen key sort of thing that basically you used to wind the watch up. And then somebody, I have no idea who, forgot. I'm sorry, I read about it, but I forgot it. Developed the first crown where you actually could use your hands, your fingers to actually wind the watch permanently. Before that, there was no crown. You used the key to set and wind the watch. And then you had a crown. And the crown sticks out of the case, so it's dangerous. So it has to have good materials with the stem and all of the stuff, because that goes very deep inside the mechanicals of the watch. So that's why they actually didn't have anything sticking out of the movement, because to protect all the
Isn't there a modern watch that still uses a key? something that costs a lot of money and just came out.
Yeah, it starts with R and ends with E. Richard Mille. Ferrari.
They made that Ferrari. Yeah.
The thinnest watch
Still
on the
needs
world.
a key.
Yes.
But it doesn't have a crown, so doesn't count. All right. Different types of crowns. We have what we call the onion crown. It's kind of a bulbous onion-looking thing with lines on it.
The pilot watches, the Flieger watches do love to have this
My
big
Grand
one.
Seiko has onion crown. We have knurled crowns. What do you mean by knurled? What do we mean by that?
Knurled is like my Bremont, when you have these little dimples basically on it, right? This is triangular. It's like a pyramids for grip.
Mm-hmm.
When you knurl something, then you have more than just the coin edge or something for grip. You have a bit more grip on it. I mean, if I look at my Glashütte, it has these stripes, right? It's like little stars. So you have these edges there. But then with my Bremont, you have these knurled ones. There's little pimples coming out like little pyramids.
So I just looked at my crown for the first time here. I have a hexagonal crown on this one.
Yeah, which is
a
very
cabochon.
Yeah, but this hectagonal or octagonal crowns are very bad, personally for me, for winding watches. It's not very nice feeling if you have to wind your watch. It's okay for automatic watches because you usually don't need to wind them much. But if you have a manual wound watch and it has an octagonal crown, I find this very annoying. I had one once. I can't remember what it was. But it was
I
not
agree.
nice.
Winding certain watches sucks. Yeah. So
And the
if there's bad
bigger
grip.
the bigger the crown, the nicer, easier it is to wind because of the
Correct.
Of course, the
Correct.
force you need.
I will get into little and
and all
big
of
right
that
now.
stuff.
But before I go
But
there,
yeah,
I
right.
want to mention
And-
what is a cabochon?
The cabochon is a stone, end stone.
Any stone generally put into the crown, right? And there's a lot of watches that do this, including your friend's Glashütte original. The
I didn't do it in my
Pano
watch.
retrograph, whatever. Yours doesn't have it, right? Yours does not have it.
No, I didn't do
No,
it in
but the
mine.
Pano retrograph, whatever, has it. And it's an actual sapphire. Mine is a fake sapphire. So on the Cartiers. Cartiers are known for this.
Yeah. So
They're
cabochons are
generally
just the head stone. It's just called head. Basically, cabochon is head.
All right.
That's
now,
what it means, caboche.
there's a few other things that we have to talk about. As you mentioned, big versus little. Little crowns suck to wind because you have to you sit there and wind it and they slip out of your fingers and they're terrible. Big
And they're
crowns.
usually harder to turn because of the angle and of the force that
Yes.
you need, because you don't have
Big crowns, of course, are fun. They're very easy to wind. You get to make a lot. If you're setting a watch, you get to make a lot of change by turning it once, because essentially you're gearing up, right? If the size of a wheel will spin faster, you will impact more turns on the movement itself. If it's small, you have to spin it 5 times. If it's big, think about your car, right? If you're going to travel 100 kilometers an hour, if you have really big wheels.
No, it depends on the gearing. But a smaller crown is usually easier to turn multiple times with one twist.
Yes, I might have mixed. So
It's just harder.
So it's easier to turn, but you get less movement out
Yes.
of it generally.
Yes.
Yep. So with bigger crowns, you get more movement, but I guess they're geared the same way. So
You can that depends on the gearing inside, but
Yeah, yeah.
generally,
But the big crown,
yeah,
the IWC
bigger
big crown is known for this, right?
can put more
You do
force
one
in it,
turn and you've gone 24 hours essentially.
because you can, with the bigger size, you can extend more force, so you can actually have a higher gear ratio in it as well. But the other thing that we have to say about big crowns is they can start to look ugly. So some of the pilots from Zenith, for example, have very big crowns, and they look, well, it's an acquired taste, let's say it this way. And the other thing is they are magnetic to doorknobs, right, and door handles.
Oh yeah, you hit it in everything, correct.
Yes.
All right. What about some crowns for added water resistance or added security? They allow you to screw them down, screw them essentially into the case side. And if you do this, essentially the idea is you cannot accidentally open it when you're in the water. If you open your crown in the water, water can get in, and that's not good. So that's another new innovation that I think Rolex created, right? Is screw down crowns. Other manufacturers had other solutions to this. such as Panerai with the Luminor, having a massive lock, like a locking mechanism. It also, Panerai does two things. Not only does it lock the crown in position, but it also gives you a crown guard, which is another thing, right? Crown guards are there for the protection of the crown. The crown is a vital piece for the movement, for the setting and using of the watch. Without it, you're screwed. So therefore, crown guards.
That's why you have a screw down one. So you're not screwed.
And crown guards are entirely, you can have a million different types, right? You can have angled crown guards, and you can have triangular crown guards, and all kinds of different things.
Yeah, so sometimes it's just the recessed crown. So the crown is actually deeper inside the case. That's one of the ways to do it. And then you can extend the case outwards, so it actually protects the crown from anything that comes its way. So it shoots off to the side, basically. Yeah. You're looking at your watch if you have a crown guard?
I'm looking, I have crown guards on. Yeah, the Santos has these very interesting looking crown guards, and they look like the beak of a bird. No crown guards for you.
I have nothing. I have no crown guard.
Nothing.
I have no
Naked.
cabochon. I have me.
Poor guy. Oh no, with my gold watch. All right, but I think you do have pushers. Do you have pushers?
No. Everything is done via the crown here with my watch. Yeah.
Now, in that case, one other thing that we have is if you have a crown, or there's some watches that don't have a crown, right? But they still may have pushers. And pushers can be used for a number of reasons. They can be on chronographs to start, stop, reset, timing things. Or they can be on things like a world timer, a perpetual calendar, or something like this, where you're just advancing a time zone or changing a date or something, right? A lot of functions cannot be done simply through a crown.
Yeah,
so we need
it depends on the movement architecture. Certain movements can do a lot via the crown, or nearly everything via the crown, or crowned and a command bezel, and so on. And some need just pushers. Sometimes they're visible, sometimes they're hidden, so that you need a kind of an instrument like a toothpick or some specific plastic piece to push these pushers in the side of the case or on the back of the case in order to manipulate the movement, the moon phase, the date, the calendar functions and other things. Yeah, so that's why you have these pushers.
And I apologize for trying to push us forward, but we got a lot of stuff to cover. So let's go on top of the case. We're still on the case, guys. On top of the case, we have something called a bezel. Essentially, a bezel is a middleman between the case and the dial, or the crystal, I should say, right? The case and the crystal.
It very often used to be attached to the case and holds the crystal in place. That's not always the case.
And now it's become
anymore.
a little bit, how do I say it? It's decorative now, right?
Yeah, that's why the old Rolex watches with the fluted dial had actually, the fluted bezel had the fluted bezel, because that was to screw in the bezel into the case and hold the crystal in place and make it watertight.
Correct. So let's talk about the different types of bezels. Some have functions. If you look at a diving watch,
they can be used for printing. I mean, one function is optics. It could be looking quite nice if you have fluted, reflective.
Okay, let's do that first. Okay, we have polished, we have engine turned, we have fluted, as you said. We have domed, we have flat, we have coin edged. All of these are just simply there to look good. Aside from the fluted, which was actually had a purpose back in the day.
Back then it had a function, not anymore. Yeah. I mean, depends on the watch.
Then those are functionless, right? Kind of. Then we have function, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
We have for diving watches. Essentially, there's different types of diving watches, but they have a bezel generally that will count time, right? That will generally have a 60-minute time frame.
Well, you have to say that there's actually a bezel that can turn.
It's a turning bezel, correct?
You can use this bezel, grab it, and turn it for diving watches in mostly unidirectional way, so in one
some
direction.
Bidirectional.
Yeah, but then it's not a really proper diver's watch. Because
it is. Some it has clicking, right? Some of them have clicks, some don't. Depends on if they're friction-based or if they're detented. detented. Is that a word? They have little detents.
I don't know, but they have these little ratchets inside to make it tick, and
yes.
you can only
So we
turn
have
them
count
in one
up,
direction.
count down.
And why would you want to do
that?
this in a diver's watch? Is one of the things is that you don't want to. You put your timer on when you actually, for the minute hand, when you go into the water, and you have a air supply for, let's say, 20 minutes, and that's why you want to know how much time has passed. And in the unidirectional bezel, if you by accident actually turn the bezel underwater, the only thing you can do is shorten the time that has passed already, and not extend it, because that would be disastrous underwater when you think you still have 10 minutes of air supply, but you don't. So because you moved your bezel. That's why usually they are unidirectional, so you can always just shorten the time that you think has passed, or extend the time that has passed, but not shorten it. And that's where you're always on the safe side.
So you could do the opposite. That's what we call a count up bezel. We also have a count down bezel. You could put it to 20 minutes and it will count down for you. And then at 0, you know that you're dead.
Then so the numbers would be not would be counterclockwise instead of clockwise.
Exactly.
Yeah, correct.
And then we also have something called graduations. It's not when the kid leaves high school. It's the lines, the tick marks in the bezel. Generally, most dive watches have it from 1 to 15. Some have it, like military watches, have it all the way around. This is so that you can tell more precisely what you're at. And of course, most likely, or most of the time, you're trying to time within the first 15 minutes, right? So you want to be very precise within 15 minutes. And then afterwards, you can eyeball it a little bit more.
Yeah.
So that's called a graduation. Then we have a very similar technology, sometimes rotating, sometimes stationary, and that is the GMT bezel. Those are not 60 minutes. Those are 24 hours and generally should show you day and night.
Yeah. I mean, they have generally a 24 hours because there's a 24-hour hand on the dial, but that's something for the later one. But it has the 24 hours around the case. How many clicks you have? Usually it is 48 or a number 96 or something like that when you have different amounts of that. Some have 24, like Rolex. They had newer versions of the GMT Masters. They just decided that 24 hours is the way to go, which of course is not nice for places like India and other areas that have half an hour time zones. So 48 hours or 48 clicks is usually a better idea. So you can actually set half hour time zones, whereas I think nearly 2 billion people in the world live in a half an hour offset time zone. There's places in Afghanistan and in India, of course. Then you have places in Asia, some places in Australia that have half an hour time zones, and so on. There's I think 28 countries that have half hour time zones. Anyhow, long story short, better to have 48 clicks. And it's a 24-hour.
Then we also have
bezel.
Tachymeters, which are very popular, right? Yes. Tachymeters are to measure speed over distance, over a set distance.
And
chronometers usually have this.
What do you need to do that? How do you operate a tachymeter?
You operate it. So generally, if you're, let's say, a racing driver, you can do a number of things. If you have a set kilometer that you know of, or a set mile, you could start the chronograph hand and drive through that kilometer and then stop it. And it will tell you your kilometers per hour or your average speed over that kilometer. Or if you are doing it on a mile, your average miles per hour. These tachymeters on these chronographs were also then replaced with something called a pulsometer. That was one that was often used for medical purposes to measure heart rates.
Yeah. So basically, what it is, you start for the tachymeter just to say, okay, when you know what a kilometer is, where it starts and where it ends, you usually use your chronograph to start it when you start driving a kilometer, and then when you reach the full kilometer, you stop it, and then with a second hand on your bezel, you can then see what speed you were traveling in, and that works for anything. Basically, it can be kilometers, it can be miles, whatever. If you have a fixed measurement to that, right? It's a fixed speed in units per hour, basically.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Now, as we said, the bezel holds in the crystal. So let's talk about the crystal, which is another word for the glass, right? The glass.
Yeah, and we call it now crystal because it has become a crystal. It was glass before, and that's the story that you like to tell so often, right? About
Reverso.
the reverso.
Yes, I can tell it. So
Because
the
it had-
reverso essentially was a solution to having glass crystals or glass watch glasses break, right? So the idea was glass was fragile. It would break if it got an impact. So there had to be a way to protect it. So there was multiple ways people protected it. If you look at Cartier and I believe Ulysse Nardin, they started putting cages on the outside of the glass. That was one way. But then, of course, that affected the way you can see the time, and it also looked like shit. The second version was the reverso version, which would allow you to rotate or close the watch so that the glass side is down. And then that way you had a metal case back essentially facing up, which then, of course, was much more difficult to break.
Yeah, and much more hard to read the time. Because you wouldn't
After
see
this,
anything.
You wouldn't see anything,
Obviously,
but
once you protect
yeah,
it.
you could always flip it. After this, we went into mineral, right?
Yeah,
And plexi.
mineral glass, plexiglass. Plexiglass has the benefit of being more flexible. So that means it doesn't shatter as easy as glass.
Hesalite is used to be a brand name, or still is a brand name
Yes.
for plexiglass.
And that was used for the moon watches
watch.
and the watches that went to space because it would have better material to actually protect the inside of it. Wouldn't shatter because the problem with in space is if you shatter something in a
Zero gravity.
in zero gravity, the shatters, the pieces
The
fly
pieces
around
go everywhere.
and the astronauts would probably breathe them in or do other things with it, which could
Or they
be
would get
very
into
dangerous.
the instruments was another issue.
Yeah, or they can stop instruments from working and create short circuits and stuff like that. So it's really bad. So in zero gravity, obviously.
Yeah,
nothing
and then
falls down.
the modern alternative to plastic is generally sapphire, which is kind of the industry standard nowadays. It is very, very scratch resistant.
Yes.
But it still can break, and it still, if it does break, it can shatter. And then that ends up becoming an issue for the movement. Hence why if a sapphire crystal breaks, you would want to stop the watch movement.
Yeah, so totally. If you ever have a broken glass on your watch, pull out the crown, stop the watch, put it in a plastic bag, and bring it to a watchmaker.
Correct. All right. Then we also have domed versus flat, right? We have flat crystals that are flat, domed crystals that are a little bit bulbous, and domed, which look nice, and then they create some nice effects on the dial, right? It looks pleasing to the eye, warm.
I think one
inviting.
of the things that is always surprising is whenever you see somebody removing a crystal from a watch, right? And watchmaker videos on YouTube or anything like that, you realize how thick these sapphire crystals usually are and how close to the dial they actually are and to the hands. There's sometimes very, very little space between everything because they're actually quite thick in order to guarantee water resistance and other things. So they have to be pressure resistant for very, very high, deep depth and all of this stuff. So it's actually quite interesting to see how big they are. And that's why we have the doming, internal and external, very often. So you have a crystal that is shaped out internally as much as possible to allow the space for the hands and everything else to actually freely roam around. And then you have, of course, the outside of the domed bezel. Yeah.
All right. So what's inside the bezel? What's inside the dial?
Wait, one thing about the sapphire crystal. I need to say one of the sapphire crystal, and it's the sapphire crystal is very hard to make. There's not many places that actually make sapphire crystals. So there's basically
these are artificial sapphire crystals. We have to say these
they're
are not
grown.
They're not going and mining sapphire.
Yeah.
Right. And then polishing it up real nice and putting it on your watch.
So
these are artificial sapphires.
If you want to create your own watch and you want to buy a sapphire crystal for your watches, then you have to go to either Switzerland or Hong Kong. These are the two places in the world where basically you can still buy sapphire crystals from companies that make them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Iowa. All right. What's inside or underneath the glass?
Air.
Air, exactly.
Or
Most
oil.
people forget that air is a very vital component in watchmaking. The dial, right? What are dials made out of?
Actually, I would say no. There's something in between the dial and the sapphire glass.
Okay, we want to go that. No, I would say that it's attached. Yeah. But okay, let's go back to the hands. Let's talk about the dial. Then on top of the dial, we'll talk about the hands.
Okay.
So, what are dials made out of?
All dials are made of meteorites.
Yes, this is why they're so expensive.
But some are.
That is one. That is absolutely true. We do have meteorite dials. And because we're talking about meteorite, we can go into stone as well, right? Yeah. So generally, any type of stone, Rolex has done this for a long, long time, has used stones, different types of stones, onyxes, lapis lazuli, and all kinds of weird stuff to make beautiful dials.
Most meteorites are actually made mostly out of metal, right? There's a lot of metal deposits, and it's not really stone. But yes, we can talk about stones.
Yeah, you're right. So it is a little bit of both, correct. So, okay, all right.
Stone,
it looks like stone.
Malachite, there's all of these different precious stones that were used. It's gemstones, sometimes of them, jade, other things that are used. Yeah.
Jade, so stones and meteorites. We can also get wood, if we're talking about natural things, right?
Yeah.
Wood was one that they often used, different types of lacquered and sealed wood.
Paper. We have used washi dials.
Ooh,
Citizen uses
linen.
Linen as well.
I forgot about linen.
Linen dials. So there's lots
paper
of
dials.
The only thing you have to make sure when creating dials is that they are not fraying out, so that nothing is actually creating deposits and just floating around on the underside of the dial and looks ugly. But other than that, you're free. And of course, it should be resistance to sun. It shouldn't fade.
Yeah, which we see a lot of fading, which is a term
over
we call
decades. Yeah,
we call it tropical dials, right? When they kind of with this patina, it's either tropical or it's spider webbing when the paint has started to crack. For instance, All right, we also have, as I said, plastic. I said first. Which we skipped over. Plastic the moon swatch. We have certain orises that are made out of recycled plastic to save the oceans, things like that. Okay? Metals.
Yep.
Or do you want to go ceramic? You said ceramic first.
Ceramics or enamel, right? So these are the different things that you can do then and make a very nice shiny version, right? If you have like porcelain dials and enamel dials and so many different things that are all kind of ceramics to a certain degree. Lovely stuff. Then, of course, we're coming into the metals. Metals allow, of course, a very, very big amount of surface finishing and engravings, right? You can make very, very nice small engravings in metal dials. So they lend themselves to have like slightly sunken in subdials or steps.
So we can have, when we talk metals, we could be steel, copper, gold, silver, brass, literally anything that you want.
Yeah. But that's creating nicely three-dimensional dials that have more depth to them, that have more details in them, that allow you to have more light reflections and other things. And of course, these metals can be then treated in different colors and different surface finishes. Again, like we said with the cases, you can have them brushed, you can have them radiated, sunburst, vertically brushed, horizontally brushed, and so on. You satinated, polished, and so on. So these different things can be all on the same dial. You can have all the different finishes if you like to, and create different effects. Really cool stuff. So the dials themselves are sometimes so expensive and so hard to make that even people like Philippe Dufour, one of the best watchmakers alive, doesn't make his own dials. He goes to Metalem to actually get the dials for his own watch. Everything else he makes himself, just not the watch.
One that we forgot when we mentioned ceramic, a sister of ceramic, so to speak, is porcelain.
Yeah, I mentioned porcelain. Porcelain, enamel.
You did?
Yes, I did, yeah.
Good.
The thing is with enamel and porcelain, they have to be burnt. They have to be burnt in a oven.
And they crack.
They have a very, very hard or low rate of success. So that means you have to burn a lot of these dials to get the ones that are straight when they come out of the oven. It's not easy. So it's tough to make. So that's why they actually when they put the enamel into the oven, they put not only the enamel on top of the dial, but also on the bottom, because when it actually dries up in the oven, it pulls the metal up. And then, of course, you have a dial that you can't use because the hands cannot turn if the edges are poking upwards. So.
One other thing we mentioned. So you mentioned different finishing. So I'll go through a little bit more detail. So sunburst on metal, meaning it's the paint displays outwards from the center.
So basically what you do is you have a round dial, for example, and you brush it from the inside to the outside. In every
or you can brush it technically any direction, right? Sunburst is one particular type.
Yeah, sunburst is the one that is basically like sun rays. You have a center and it goes outwards. That's why it's.
But you could also have the brushed in a horizontal, a vertical, however you want manner. Right?
That's then the brushed, not sunburst.
We also have radial brushing, where you brush in a circle, essentially.
It looks like a spiral when you look at it with a light playing in it. Yeah,
nice. And then one other thing that we didn't talk about is relief dials, where essentially I see this a lot with German silver, which surprisingly is actually not silver.
No, German silver is alloy, yeah.
Exactly. So essentially what they're doing here is it's a very thick dial, and they will cut away. So instead of applying a logo or applying numerals, they will cut away at the dial itself.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned before, that metals lend themselves for these decorations.
Yeah, but you mentioned in subdials.
You can engrave them.
No, but this is the opposite of engraving. This is the
taking things away is the opposite of engraving. It's exactly the same.
For the purpose of relief. So most people will engrave into the dial and have essentially, let's say, if I have a flat dial, they will take, well, technically they're both engraving. You're correct in this. But the purpose, a lot of watches will have a dial. They will engrave a number into it, right? A 3, and then that is there. The opposite would be to engrave everything and only leave the 3 up at the top, right?
Correct,
and then it's the opposite. So,
yeah, and that's when you do these kind of things. And there's one big technology that you might want to refer to is this guilloche, this engine turning, when you actually take away things to create a pattern. And these things are so hard to make, and so there's not many people in the world that actually do these hand guilloche stuff anymore. One of the companies that still does it a lot is Breguet with their dials, and there's a couple of dial makers in the world that still do this hand guilloche work, this engine turning. It's very, very labor intensive. It's very hard to learn, and if you make one mistake, that's it. You have to throw away the dial and start new. And that's why when you spend 30, 40, 50, 60 hours on a dial and you have to start fresh, that is very annoying. So that's why it's so expensive.
Correct. All right. Now, as we said, there's one other thing is the finishing. The paint, right? We could have either a regular paint, as you would normally see, but we also have things called fumé or dégradé, or a gradient dial where the colors change, right? Essentially, you go from black to a color or vice versa, or we could have just one color fading into another color. This could be both done radially, from the center outwards, or it can be done top down, left to right, whatever you want. The James Cameron Deep Sea kind of fades from black to blue, or blue to black, depending on how they're mimicking as you go down in the ocean.
So what are they
that's
doing?
One of the things.
Is it blue on the top or black in the bottom, or otherwise?
Exactly. If I'm not mistaken, is it the other way around?
I don't know. I think it's blue on top, right? And dark on the bottom, so it's like going down.
It is blue on the top and black on the bottom.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, so it's exactly
like the ocean.
How it should be.
You have more light.
I couldn't forget. Yeah. I couldn't remember. So we have a lot of these fadings. H. Moser is very famously doing fumé dials, right?
Yes.
The ones that look smoked, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll let you take on the hands. Talk about hand sets. You have 5 minutes. Go.
Hands. Wow. Yeah, I have to take a look at my list as well because there's so many of them.
Let's talk with the most common.
But the most common is a baton hands. They are just sticks, a longer stick that shows the minutes, and a shorter stick that shows the hours, and that's it.
Could have Lume plots or not, right? That's
Not
another thing we should mention.
That depends on what kind of watch it is. I mean, if you're going for the most basic, then it doesn't have any lume. Then it's just a stick that shows the time, like in a pocket watch or something.
That's another thing we forgot about. If we're here, then we got to go back to the dial as well. Remember, we can have indices. We can have numerals. They could be applied. They could be painted. Applied means they put them on. It's a separate piece, right?
Yeah.
They could have lume plots.
So applied could be glued. They could be pushed in and into sockets, basically into like a small little hole.
So that's one thing that we should mention.
Yeah, dial making is a whole world. It's an entire episode, I think.
Yeah,
especially when you talk about this guilloche work and hiding little mistakes with the sub dials and the rings and all of this stuff. If you know what to look for, you suddenly find out a whole new world of things. Anyhow, so from the hands, we have the very famous Breguet hands. You know, the Breguet, one of the oldest watch companies in the world. Then you have swords.
A stick with a circle, and then there's an open circle, and then the stick continues at the other side.
Pointed hand in the end. It's very nice because it differentiates the hour from the minutes and all of this stuff. It's important there. Then you have
another simple one is the arrow hand, right?
Yeah,
literally, it's an arrow.
And some put the arrow in both hands, the hour and the minute, and some only in one. Some only for the hour.
And it's funny because some people do hours, some people do minutes. Omega is known to use their broad arrow hands, right?
And this is on the minute, right? My Super Ocean arrow hand has the arrow on the hour.
Yes, so it could go either way.
So yeah. Weird. Then you have dagger hands and sword hands.
Dagger hands better known as sword hands, right?
No, they're different. Daggers are different from swords. Swords are flaring outwards, and daggers are pointy.
Oh yeah, I guess they by swords.
The swords
they go
are going out
and
then have a small So that, but they are all similar kinds: sword, dagger, dauphine.
They all have a very sharp, pointy tip at the end, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. One hand set that I hate. I cannot stand. Cathedral hands. I do not like them.
I had a Seiko. What is it? A Seiko Alpinist that has cathedral hands.
Yeah, I don't like it. That's the reason I haven't got one.
Yeah, I thought I might get used to it, but it just doesn't look that nice.
It's weird. It's weird.
Funny enough, it is similar to another hand style, the Mercedes hand, that we actually like.
But we do love that.
Yeah.
And the whole point of the Mercedes hand is so that the lume plots won't fall off, right? So essentially, instead of having one big lume plot, which could potentially break and fall off, you have three smaller pieces and you still get this almost
paint,
the same amount of lume.
Yeah. It's paint that is being applied to that hand and then it dries up and eventually it can crack. And
this, of course, leads us to the snowflake hands as well, which we forgot on the list.
No, it's on the list.
Where?
I put it on the list. Yeah.
It is there. Snowflake. I'll check it off. Snowflake hands.
What I like is
Tudor's version.
Syringe hands can look very nice.
Syringe hands, I like syringe hands. The ones on the we could call them syringe hands. The ones on the new Moser Streamliners.
Yes, exactly. Very nice.
They're not really traditional syringe hands, but they are syringe hands.
And then one of the things that we see in the Seamaster, for example, the Seamaster 300 Professional from Omega is skeleton hands.
Ooh, yes, skeleton hands. So anything you could see through.
Yeah, and it's I'm not so sure. That was one of the things I never really liked that much on my Seamaster 300 Professional, the skeleton hands. I always wondered why do they have this? Because it made it harder for me, at least, to differentiate between the minutes and the hours. Didn't like it that much.
Yes. Exactly. All right. Alpha hands essentially are little baby spades, almost, right? Like skinny spades. So if you look at a spade on a deck of cards, you push it in, and that's an alpha hand.
Yeah.
Leaf hands. You want to go for leaf hands?
Yeah, a leaf hand. No, I don't even know what a leaf hand is. What is a leaf hand? Did I put it in?
A leaf hand, depending on what it looks like, or because it has, of course, different applications, right? Yeah. Generally speaking, the one that everyone thinks about is something like, let's see, which one am I looking at? They're generally it's like the sword, like the sword hand, but instead of having a midpoint where it is two lines, it flares out and flares back in, this is a natural progression. So think about a palm frond, a skinny palm frond. That is a leaf hand.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else? Hands good?
The fleur-de-lis hands, they're quite common in older watches. The fleur-de-lis is the lilies
symbol
of the French heraldic charges and these kind of things. Very traditional, and they just have the fleur-de-lis on one or the sides or inside the hand. Very cool looking, but I haven't seen a watch in the metal with these kind of hands, but would like to. It's cool.
Yes. All right. Now, going on from the case, the dial, and all that stuff to, I guess now we're done with the head of the watch. Yeah. So let's move on.
Now you need to attach the watch to something.
To your wrist, hopefully, right? Yes. And you could do that in two ways. Either you have a strap or a bracelet, right? Straps are generally cloth, leather, any type of soft material that wraps around your hand. Yeah. Bracelets are generally metal. Okay, or ceramic.
And just historically, that's why these lugs were created that we mentioned earlier. Because before, when you had a pocket watch, you would just have an attachment for a chain, basically, when you just put the watch somewhere else so it doesn't fall on the ground. But now that you have to put it onto something like your wrist, so you can see it while you're doing things, which is some incredible innovation at the time, right? Saying like, hey, let's have a way to look at the watch while we're doing things like piloting a plane or driving a car, right? So suddenly that was needed, right? So
exactly. So these straps, once again, they connect. Generally, straps, the simplest way of connecting a strap would be through a pin buckle, right? So a pin buckle would be literally a tang, a buckle, you put it into a hole, there's holes on the other side, you connect it, and that's it. This is like the simplest way of strapping up a strap. There is more complicated versions. So for instance, a deployant class came about. Not deployment, it's deployant. Yeah. That's one of the things that often people confuse.
Yeah, I know a lot of people, but nowadays, and it's a funny thing is if you search, if you make a small Google search on deployment clasp, you find even watch companies using this term, and they have now actually basically even companies like Hodinkee have said, okay, the fight is over. You can now say deployment clasp because it is an interchangeable word. Basically, deployant is French for deployment. So,
all right. Nonetheless, we have these deployant clasps, right? Essentially, there's a button. Yeah. It opens the clasp for you. And some are combinations. Some will still have the pin buckle. So like my Grand Seiko has both. You size it based on the pin buckle. And then it has a deployant that allows you to easily take it off. So
the pin buckle is the way to attach the strap, one of the strap sides, to the holder. Right? So the other side is attached with a pin or something else that you put on this. So you can use the same strap to actually use in a normal pin buckle or in a deployant clasp. That's why you have these things, because the strap is interchangeable. You can use this also in a normal pin buckle. But generally, if you have, let's say, a bracelet with a deployant clasp, you just have the bracelet attached to two sides and then it folds over.
Yep. All right. And then we also have a double pin buckle, which we see on some larger, thicker straps like Panerais, G-Shocks. Well, I don't like them, essentially. Like, it's hard enough to put one pin into a hole. To have to do two simultaneously sometimes sucks. One won't want to go in. But this is another thing. You have double holes. It's more secure. If the pin breaks for any reason, you still have one holding it. All right. And that leads us to the alternative to a strap, which is a bracelet. And generally, historically, there's two types. There's what we call a oyster bracelet, which essentially has three squares, three pieces next to each other, making up one link.
Yes, three links. I mean,
we don't call them links, like three-piece
links, a three-piece link. Yeah.
And then we have a jubilee, which is traditionally a five-piece. This has changed over time as well. Like for instance, on my Cartier right now, I have a single piece, right? So this is technically not anything traditional, right?
No, and then you have the beads of rice.
Oh, the beads of rice. I forgot about
That
that's a
can
good
be
one too.
more. Then you have
the chainmail,
the mesh one.
the mesh, or whatever you want to call it, the Milanese loop. Lots of different types. The shark, or Omega calls it the shark-proof bracelet on the Ploprof.
Because these shark vests that divers wear have this mesh, like the old knights, right?
Yeah.
The knights armor
Exactly.
under the armor, they had these chain shirts.
And then the bracelet will have a clasp because, of course, you can't have a buckle on a bracelet. So we have a clasp. We have two different kinds. We have a regular deployant, as we mentioned before, or we can have what's called a butterfly, which essentially opens, which is what my Cartier is right now. It opens from the middle. It opens half and half each direction.
Yeah, and then you have of course the different buttons, single button on one side, double buttons, both have to be pressed. So
some with no buttons.
Some friction fit where you just pull. Some with leaf springs that you just have a certain.
Some with ceramic ball bearings like Tudors.
Yeah, exactly. With a
lots of things,
safety clip on it.
And of course, the big hot topic in bracelets today is also the idea of having some type of quick extension, right? Bracelets in the past, you sized it and that was it.
Yeah.
But now we have to, where people are saying, oh, well, my wrist increases by 1 centimeter every day. And you can't go size your bracelet again every single day. So they've started including these easy adjustments, right? And this is a relatively new thing.
Yeah, and you had this kind of micro adjustments in the clasp, even historically in my very old Casios from 30, 40, 50
you had
years
micro
ago.
adjustments,
Just they needed a toothpick or some little piece of metal that you pushed this little spring bar to move it back and forth inside this little micro adjust. It wasn't very easy. It wasn't like you can do it on the fly. You needed to take the watch off and then fiddle around with it and do it.
Exactly.
But that's what we want now. When we pay so much money for a watch, we want some comfort. So if we live in air-conditioned environments that we do now, and it's hot and cold and humid and not humid, sometimes your wrist swells a bit over the time of the day or shrinks a bit. I don't know. And that's when you actually need to adjust it. With a pin buckle, it's easy.
Exactly.
But if you have a metal bracelet, it can just, when your hand turns blue, it's time to take off your watch.
And that's where I am
public service announcement.
No quick adjustment on the sensors.
So lots of companies are doing this now with a small little press of a button.
You can do all kinds of stuff
on the outside. You press the logo like IWC or JLC, and then you can move it to a certain amount, like half a centimeter or even up to a centimeter. You can move it around. Sometimes it's hidden.
Yeah, exactly. All right. And the other hot topic with bracelets nowadays is the word integrated.
Yeah.
What does this mean to us?
Integrated means that you don't have the traditional lugs that have a spring bar attached to them to actually fit other things in it. They are specifically made for one type of watch. That means it's part of the case. Sometimes it doesn't really, it is really a substantial part of the watch. So you can't even remove it easily. It's not meant to be removed to a certain extent. So it's really, really made for it. So that's the difference in that. Yeah.
And integrated has a different definition to different people, right? Some people say that Rolexes are integrated because essentially the design is taken into consideration, the watch plus the bracelet. But in some cases, of course, like the Patek and the Nautilus and the Royal Oak, you physically cannot remove.
The
Tissot PRX you can remove technically.
Yes, you can. And you can get other straps for it, But I think with the Rolex, of course, you can remove them as well. But the end links are made for the case. They fit seamlessly into the case. So I wouldn't call it integrated, but it was the integrated look. Let's say it this way.
Yes, exactly.
Right? So,
All right. And last but not least, how do we attach the... well, first we can talk about sizing. All right. Essentially, there's multiple ways of sizing these bracelets. We can have the old school method of hammers and pins, right? You essentially hammer out a pin that holds in between. It's like a sleeve and a collar. I believe.
Sleeve and collar is pin and collar is different from just pins.
So yeah, there's just pins. There's pin and collar.
Yeah.
Then there's screws.
Yeah.
And then there's even spring bars in between links, right?
Yeah.
We'll get into spring bars to hold the bracelet on. But for instance, G-Shocks, the metal G-Shocks, each link is held together with a spring bar.
And
spring bar.
And some Grand Seikos, they have, Grand Seikos? They have these tiny screws on both sides. Tiny, tiny ones. And then you put a bar inside and you put two screws on the side. I don't know if it was Grand Seiko, but it was amazing. Complicated stuff.
Well, the what's it called? The one I have on, the Santos, has spring bars. Not spring bars, sorry. It's got a little pin. You push it in with a nail, it pops out, you pull it out, boom, you're good to go.
That's the most amazing thing because you don't need any tools for this, right?
Yes, correct.
And you can, and every single link is exchangeable, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Every single one, correct.
Which is absolutely amazing. And if you think what they have done, Cartier, with this system, I think it's just absolutely fantastic. They did a really good job,
and I'm surprised no one else is using it, or other people aren't taking advantage of such a similar situation.
That's super cool.
All right, and last but not least, let's talk spring bars. What is a spring bar? I mentioned it just a moment ago, but
the spring bars. We haven't defined it. Spring bars, they extend. They have little side. They have a spring inside. That's why they're called a spring bar. It's a bar of metal, so it's a round rod that has two little pins on the side that are pushed in, that you can push into, squeeze together by the spring that is inside the bar, and they are pushing outwards into a hole, and the hole is in the lugs. And before you do that, you put the spring bar into a strap or the bracelet, squeeze it together, push it in between the lugs, let it go, and then it should ideally...
When it finds the hole, it'll pop out.
Yes, fit into the holes and hold the watch into place, the strap into place on the lugs. Yeah.
But now, of course, people are really pushing these quick release spring bars. And there's a whole bunch of different types of quick release spring bars. For instance, the first of these was like just having a little rod that allows you, it's a hole through the strap that allows you to, with your fingernail, just kind of pull it a little bit. It compresses the spring bar and you can take the strap out.
Yeah. And
now people are getting really crazy.
And it's literally the simplest way, and I think also the nicest way of doing these things, right?
I've heard some issues with these types. And this might be one of the reasons a lot of companies have moved away from this. The little strap of leather or material that's in between this and the strap itself. So if you look on the backside, right, there's a tiny strip, maybe 1 or 2 millimeters thick. And these tend to tear over time. They will wear and they could tear. And if they tear, essentially, you no longer have, the spring bar can come out. And the bracelet or the strap, is not fixed as well on the watch anymore. So how rarely this happens, who knows?
In my last 5-6 years with these kind of spring bars, I mean, I must admit, I haven't worn a quick release spring bar 5 years in a row.
Yeah. So this is the thing: is who knows?
I don't know.
Who knows what happens?
Because
we also have the opposite of quick release, which would be kind of fixed lugs or fixed spring bars, which is what a lot of military watches used to have. Essentially, where they welded in the spring bars so that you can. There's no springs. It's a fixed bar. So then all you can use is a NATO strap or some kind of single pass strap that will then secure the watch even more to the wearer's wrist. Because, of course, spring bars have the tendency to fail. There's a slight chance that they do fail. And if it fails, the whole watch falls to the ground. Yeah. But if you're using a NATO strap or a single pass strap, then that will, of course, if it does fail, if one spring bar fails, the watch won't fall off. It'll still stay attached by the other spring bar. And then if it's welded, there's even a lesser chance of that happening.
And I think we need to break the news here. A cheap spring bar is, of course, has a higher likelihood to fail. So if you buy the cheapest spring bar for your very expensive watch, it's not a good idea. There are spring bars made in Switzerland. They are only cents more expensive than the other ones, right? It's not a huge difference to buy a really proper Swiss-made spring bar. But if you think about it, this little tiny thing holds your maybe $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 watch. So, Yes, it's a good investment to have a good spring bar because
exactly.
it helps it
and
from
then
damage.
Solutions to this problem were, let's say, IWC, which has a spring bar with bracelets and straps that clip onto it. There is no spring bar in my Santos, for instance. It has just a button and it releases the entire bracelet. There's a whole bunch of different solutions to this idea of quick release or quickly removing straps. But then, of course, these become proprietary, and that means you cannot buy any strap that you would like, and that becomes
sometimes you can, because there's manufacturers, OEM manufacturers, not OEM manufacturers. There's aftermarket manufacturers who do
like Deluxe.
Yeah, like Deluxe, who copy then.
Who then get cease and desist letters, and they.
Unfortunately, sometimes that happens, like in the case of Cartier, right, where they said we can't do that anymore, which is a bit sad. But they still do for, let's say, Cartier and for the Tissot PRX, and it's no problem to do that. So some brands are more lenient than others.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So, wow, very quickly, we went through a lot of stuff. So I hope you guys have learned something. Yeah. And if you haven't, then you should have already known all these things. So either way, that's part 1. Bear with us for part 2, which will come soon. And there will be a lot of stuff that hopefully you didn't know.
Yeah.
Let's see. We got to compile a list first. But anyway, thank you for listening. And hit us up on Instagram if you have any questions.
Yeah,
we're always helpful and friendly, right?
Yes.
So, yes, see you next time.
Bye-bye. See you. Bye.